The ordinary consciousness of people, which does not understand what biofield structures are, does not understand the essence of the power of ideas over people. Such people tend to search for a place where the so-called world government is hiding, looking for names and surnames. And even more so, not knowing what structureless governance is, they correlate the statements of politicians, supposing that there exists a world government. However, this does not mean that this world government sits somewhere and distributes responsibilities. The finance minister of planet Earth, the minister of defense, the minister of industry. No, they rule in a structureless way, guided by ideas that the ancient Egyptian Red Seas once formed. And when a situation arises, all these people, over 300 families, they make the same decisions their ancestors made. That is, this knowledge is inherited. When a problem arises, a task is posed to scientists and other specialists. Moreover, these families monitor all the trends that take place in public life and adapt these new trends, including in the scientific world, to suit their interests. In this way, according to our estimates, they adapted the teaching of Ronald Hubbard, who probably did not know what we are talking about now. He made a theory on how to make human life happy. Drawing cybernetic analogies, he compared the work of the brain with computing technology and developed methods of how to free a person from fear, torment, suffering, for the purpose of making his work more productive in governing labor, and so on. And those who follow such trends say, this is useful to us. After making some edits and adjustments to their original theory, with adaptation to their goals, they decided to use those people who are guided by this teaching to achieve their goals, that is, the goals of the ones who made adjustments. I mean to say that there is a continuous monitoring of the processes taking place in society, and what fits into the goals of the top of the pyramid is supported in society, and what is unacceptable is either changed in their wanted direction, or crushed, discredited, or simply hushed up. These are some of the principles of how the global predictor works. What are the methods and ways of concentration of governance of productive forces? In the conception of social safety, they are summarized into 6 priorities of the generalized means of governance over countries and nations. A priority is a level, a degree, or power of its significance. They are located in such a way that the most powerful priority is the very first. Going from the first to the 6th priority, the power and efficiency of the priority decreases. However, the speed of action rises from the 1st to the 6th. So the 6th priority is the least effective, but with its help you can quickly achieve the desired result. In fact, governance aimed at the concentration of productive forces of humanity is carried out on the basis of all 6 priorities in total. The only question is, what exactly prevailed in this or that case, in this or that historical period? But in fact, all the priorities were and are used. This is being done now. Therefore, let's take a look at these priorities step by step and draw parallels with how this is done now in our modern life. So, let's start from the simple and move up to the complex. The simplest priority is the 6th priority. This is the use of conventional weapons, conventional means of killing people and destroying material structures. How can you simply conquer another country, make people slaves in the global slave pyramid, which you, I hope, have already learned, by force of arms? How to make a slave work? You point a gun at him, tell him to work, and he will work. If he refuses to work, then you can kill him. Because of fear of death, the slave will do what he's told. If you need to conquer a country and make a lot of people slaves, so that this country works for you, then you conquer the country, you place military men everywhere, or patrols to control cities and villages, and the entire conquered country, its human resources, natural resources, all its riches, work for the target of the invaders, you. But this weapon is not very effective. Why? If overwatchers, those military men or patrols that you place in the conquered country, are distracted, slaves can grab the overwatchers' weapons, kill them and escape. If the country is conquered by force, then people go to forests, become partisans, can kill invaders and so on. Going back to the concept of stability in terms of predictability, you can see that this is a very unstable method of governance, as it does not ensure stability of governance over processes, although certain goals can be achieved rather quickly. Meanwhile, it is difficult to ensure stability. Therefore, the fifth priority is more powerful than the sixth. This is the priority of genocide. The most ancient type of such a weapon is alcohol and drugs. You know, there is one Russian song which goes like this. No need in an eye for an alcoholic. You give him a shot and do with him what you like. If we draw parallels with the previous priority of governance, then you can see that it is not necessary to point a pistol at a person to force him to do what is needed. However, actions on this priority will take more time. You pour him a glass of wine today, the next day you pour another glass. So you treat him with alcohol for a month, and in a month he will come with trembling hands and say, "What I have to do to get another glass?" And the person will work for this glass of wine, vodka, whatever. In the end, you spend a lot of time getting this man drunk, getting him hooked on alcohol, but the result is more stable. The most impressive example from human history is the capture of Native Americans. We've seen a lot of films about them, but few people know that at first there were very few invaders, and they destroyed the whole civilization of Native Americans. The invaders did not have enough bullets to shoot all of them. So what did they do? Moonshine machines were made from the barrels of guns. Then the invaders gifted them to the leaders of the tribes, in order to push them to drink alcohol. As a result, what do we have now? Where are these Native Americans? In their own land, they live on reservations. If we draw parallels with our country, then look what is happening in the vastness of our country. Outright alcoholic nicotine genocide. Villages are abandoned. Those who decide to live in villages drink endlessly. Women in villages drink a lot. Even school students, 12 to 14-year-old boys and girls, drink beer. This is terrible. But the drunk and the sleepy don't think their own thoughts. Recall everything that we said about the sense of measure, the gene pool, the genetic nucleus that ensures the reproduction of generations. So all this is an open genocide, including drugs. In addition, their religion also takes part in getting Russians drunk. You know, we have the following saying, which has existed since the time of the christening of Russia. The fun of Russia is drinking alcohol. Russians cannot live without it. Who said that? Vladimir the Great, who Christianized the Kievan Rus, who is recognized as a saint in our country. He slept with all the girls in his kingdom, but he is now a saint. He also introduced alcohol drinking. Just think about what it means to receive the Holy Communion. When one receives the Holy Communion, one drinks kagger. Now, imagine if you give a teaspoon of kagger to a baby for communion. This is analogous to 100 grams of vodka for an adult. So, since childhood, they cultivate an alcohol addiction in a kid or even a baby. This is why we Russians are imposed with the idea that the fun of Russia is drinking alcohol. Russians cannot live without it. This is governance. And in a probabilistically predetermined way, alcohol-addicted people behave accordingly. What about drugs? Drugs also solve another problem. They reduce the population. That is, drug addicts do not live more than 30 plus or minus 2 or 3 years. Moreover, they themselves pay for their murder. If you pull the string, you will come across the path of those who cover this whole business, who bring in all these drugs. But this path will also lead you to the Queen of England, because the English royal dynasty, since the times of the Opium Wars in China, has been controlling the world drug market. When we see a gang fight in Central America between a Colombian cartel and some other drug mafia, what is this? This means someone has not been sharing their profits. I mean, all this is under strict control. And when some mafia tries to wiggle out from under this power, it is squeezed hard, including in Afghanistan. Drugs flowed into the USSR in great volumes when the Soviet troops entered Afghanistan. Certain leaders of our state were also involved in this. They participated in this drug business. They were contaminated with these things. That was why some big bosses, people in high places, behaved quietly, because the whole thing was under control. The weapon of genocide is a terrible tool that affects not only the living, but also the next generations, since it affects human genetics, brings the potential of slow mutations in the human genome, and leads to the degradation of people. You cannot drive a car while intoxicated, say nothing of governing a state. We saw our popularly elected Boris Yeltsin, how he conducted an orchestra in Germany. This is terrible. Therefore, the conception of social safety says that alcohol must be excluded from the life of leaders, but we see them everywhere with a glass of something. By the way, in the times of the USSR, these alcohol-drinking feasts, under the reign of the Central Committee of the so-called Communistic Party, were popular throughout the country. That was disgusting. The fight against alcohol in our country led to the other side of the coin, because prohibitions do not solve anything. Moreover, it was a powerful maneuver of the global mafia, the global predictor, when alcohol-dependent people were deprived of the opportunity to get rid of this dependency. Look, that maneuver was a vaccination given to the people against any future anti-alcohol laws, campaigns, and so on. This is a method of structureless governance. At first, they scared the people a little bit. The people were outraged. But the results were not bad even then. Injuries decreased sharply. Mortality decreased, but at the same time, vineyards were cut down, and there were no other measures. Prohibitions do not solve anything, and people come up with a rejection to such prohibitions. When we now talk about the need for a sober lifestyle, many refer to that bad experience in the past. They say they already tried to solve this problem in the past, but it is unsolvable. As you can see, the people were given, as we say, a certain vaccination in order for them to think so. By whose efforts was this done? By the efforts of Gorbachev and Ligachev. But it seems that Ligachev was a sincere person. He simply did not understand that. But everyone within the boundaries of his measure of understanding works for himself, and within the boundaries of his measure of non-understanding works for those who know and understand more. By the way, this is the reason, the formula, why many sincerely honest people often turn out to be unsuccessful and ineffective, and even achieve the opposite results, different from what they originally wanted. This is how most sincere patriots around the world can be described. Therefore, it is not enough to be only a patriot. It is not enough to be only sincere and honest. For success, you need to increase the measure of your understanding, so as not to be a tool in the hands of those who know and understand more. A true patriot, before getting into the games of big bosses, will expand the measure of his understanding to the appropriate level, so that he can beat and outsmart them, due to his greater measure of understanding. Unfortunately, you cannot outsmart them only through sincerity and honesty. Also, weapons of genocide today include pesticides, GMOs, additives, and all kinds of chemicals in food, hygiene items, toothpastes, shower gels, shampoos, diapers, pads, and so on, chemicals in pharmaceuticals, medicine, as well as toxic substances in other goods and products. And then what? Indeed, the leader of a tribe can get out of the influence of alcohol, and an addict can get out of the influence of drugs. Therefore, here is a stronger and more sustainable governance, the fourth priority, the priority of economic weapons on the basis of usury. Let's go back to the doctrine of Deuteronomy from Isaiah. Thou shalt not lend upon usury to thy brother, usury of money, usury of victuals, usury of anything that is lent upon usury. Unto a stranger thou mayst lend upon usury, but unto thy brother thou shalt not lend upon usury, that the Lord thy God may bless thee in all that thou settest thine hand to in the land whither thou goest to possess it. And thou shalt reign over many nations, but they shall not reign over thee. And the sons of strangers shall build up thy walls, and their kings shall minister unto thee. For in my wrath I smote thee, but in my favor have I had mercy on thee. Therefore thy gates shall be open continually. They shall not be shut day nor night, that men may bring unto thee the forces of the Gentiles, and that their kings may be brought. For the nation and kingdom that will not serve thee shall perish, yea, those nations shall be utterly wasted. To say it differently, it is no longer necessary to get people drunk, get them hooked on drugs, get them on the needle, and so on, since now we are talking about an economic needle. Need some money? You can take some, but you will pay back a little more. At this stage of our lectures, we confine ourselves to a little, since in our later lectures we will go into much more detail on economics in particular. In the meantime, I will say this to give you all an image on how our country, with the help of this economic weapon, was conquered. Some boys came from the IMF from Switzerland and asked our boys from the Kremlin, "Do you need money?" And notice how they answered. "Yes, boys from the IMF, our country has everything: gas, oil, gold, silver, nickel, aluminum, zinc, timber. Using our timber, you can make as much paper as you want, and then you can print as much money as you want. But we have no money in Russia to do that." And the boys from the IMF with their heads held up high, said, "In Switzerland, we don't have anything that you have, but we have money, and we will give you money, but we will give it to you on two conditions. The first condition is that you will pay back a little more to us at interest. And the second condition, since we must be sure that you will pay back the money to us, you must carry out reforms in accordance with our recommendations." This is, generally speaking, how this plot was realized. And our boys from the Kremlin have borrowed so much money over all these years that now the whole country should work for free, according to various estimates, for about 10 years, in order to pay back the interest loans of different kinds. In other words, we are all slaves. We are in debt bondage as a result of the actions of our boys from the Kremlin. We, by the way, did not give them the authority to sell us into slavery, either according to the Constitution or anything else. And this, by the way, is a very serious thesis. We can hold these Kremlin boys responsible for the crimes against our peoples. We already mentioned that one of the distortions of our world is money makes money. It is a lie. Money itself does nothing. Everything is done by human labor. The purpose of money is to escort the circulation of goods and services. There must be a correspondence between the mass of money and goods. More money means inflation. Less money means deflation. The growth of goods and services is determined by the growth of the country's energy potential. Why? Because now all goods and services are made on the basis of electricity. Electric looms, electric pumps, electric motors, electric saws, shavers, vacuum cleaners. This means that if there is electricity, there are goods. If there is no electricity, there are no goods. Where is there more electricity? Where are the Sayano-Shushenskaya and the Bratsk hydroelectric plants, the reserves of gas, oil, and so on? In Russia. And what about Switzerland? Here is the definition of currency parity. The currency parity is now based on the Rothschild fixing procedure. Twice a day, after breakfast and lunch, this international mafia, the global predictor, gathers in one of the London banks under the leadership of a Rothschild. And these people, having specific goals towards each country, assign the cost of gold per troy ounce. But nobody knows the volumes of gold sales and purchases in every country. And only this banking corporation knows. By phone, they are reported in which country how many rich people have begun to buy gold, and how many of them have begun to sell it. What does it mean that they started buying gold? This means one economic situation. If gold is being sold, then this points to another economic situation. Therefore, by the volume of sales and purchases of gold in a country, one can make judgments on the economic state of that country. And if so, then the assignment of cost per troy ounce of gold can control these processes, including the economy. What formula is used to determine that $1 costs 29 rubles 32, exchange rate in 2004? You will not find this formula anywhere. Where does all this come from then? After all, someone writes these numbers. The central bank of every country is not subordinate to either the government or the state. It is a private corporation. Putin says, it is necessary to subordinate the central bank to the government, because money is a tool of governance over social processes in a country. So what is the financial credit system? The financial credit system is a system of structureless governance. Now imagine, you are an entrepreneur. You need to renew the equipment for your business. Otherwise, you will not be able to withstand the competition. For this, you need money. So you go to a banker and ask for a loan to buy new equipment. And here comes the moment of truth. If the banker gives you a loan, your business will continue to exist. And if he doesn't, then bye-bye business. So who does the fate of your business depend on? Who determines the future of your business? Who is the owner? Factually, it turns out that the banker is the owner. While your business is successful, you are the owner. But when new challenges come, which you as the owner cannot answer, then the banker becomes the owner. So it turns out that the financial credit system, in a probabilistically predetermined way, rules the behavior of people. Going back to the situation with a loan, you come to the bank, and the banker asks you about your political orientation. If your political orientation is different from what he expects, then he will not give you a loan. Here is the freedom of speech, human rights, and so on. And even if he gives you a loan, then he will give it to you at an interest rate. Why was our industry destroyed in Russia? Did someone issue decrees to destroy it? Destroy plants and factories that were built in the USSR? No, no one issued such decrees. But this is exactly what was done. Why did the so-called buy and sell business begin to flourish in our country? In the days of the USSR, many of our engineers went with their inventions from one bureaucratic door to another in frantic attempts to implement their projects. But then the very promising democracy came, and many engineers had high hopes that now they would implement their daring projects. And by the way, these hopes were played on in order to ensure the liquidation of the USSR. However, the so-called democracy came. The engineers were hoping for the implementation of their projects by launching production lines and so on. But they faced the need for loans. The interest on loans was 200, 300, and sometimes even up to 500% per year. So our engineers put off the implementation of their daring projects and began to engage in this buy and sell thing to feed their families. Thus, all production in Russia was reduced to an acceptable minimum. This is an example of governance through predeterminations. So, creating such an economic climate, they knew what it would lead to, and that was exactly what was needed. After all, no one directly told our engineers to give up their dreams and production, but the overwhelming majority did exactly what was needed. Therefore, all talented Russian engineers began to travel to Turkey in order to buy jackets, fur coats, gold there, and bring it all back to Russia to resell. But in such conditions, in fact, all sorts of talents perished in people. Scientists, engineers, world-class inventors, and others could not realize their potentials. This is how economic predetermination governed not only the economic climate, but also the fates of people. This is the economic priority. Therefore, in such conditions, our engineers should not state that they themselves made the decision to engage in this buy and sell business. The global mafia, the global predictor, in a probabilistically predetermined way, expected that the people would move in the needed direction. This was one of the ways to rule the containment of development in Russia. This is how the financial credit system and loan interest usury appear to be means of governance over millions of people around the world. This is the fourth priority of generalized means of governance, the economic one. It is through this priority that one can understand what the liberation of the third world countries from their colonial yoke means. This was in the middle of the last century, in the 50s, the 60s. Britain was then the ruler of the seas, but Britain ruled its colonies on the sixth priority, weapons of destruction. So the British held power by force of arms, but there was no stability. The people in its colonies were indignant, expressing discontent that foreign soldiers were walking on their land. And what did the global mafia do? The global predictor shifted the governance over countries and nations from the sixth priority to the fourth. They gave those colonies the so-called freedom. But in fact, all these countries and nations, having been freed from the colonial yoke, fell into the economic yoke. So earlier, the yoke was supported by the force of weapons, as a result of which the people in the colonies were indignant, but then they seemed to be freed. So why be indignant? All three named priorities, the sixth, fifth, and fourth, conditionally refer to the so-called material weapons, although they also imply informational impacts. But so that the people do not understand how they are robbed with the help of usury, how they are hooked on alcohol, drugs, food, medicine, personal hygiene items, and so on, there is a third priority for this, an ideological weapon. Generally speaking, from the point of mass use, it would be more accurate to name this a factological technological weapon. What is an ideology? An ideology is a social technology. So, there are technologies for processing metal or wood. And there are also technologies for processing people's consciousness. Therefore, the technological priority is very easily viewed through ideologies. Ideologies include religious confessions, cults, teachings, secular ideologies. For this reason, the principle of divide, pit against each other and conquer is implemented here, since if we compare the work of the aircraft autopilot and the informational influence, then what do we see here? For a certain number of people, part of the super system, Jesus rose, all sorts of biblical dogmas and so on are recorded in their heads. And these elements of the super system are guided by these ideals. For others, Allah Akbar and other accompanying dogmas are recorded in their heads. And for others, it is Karl Marx and Rosa Luxemburg are the best people on planet Earth, plus accompanying dogmas are hammered into their heads. In other words, everyone has an ideology in their heads, their own mode of behavior and decision-making, based on the principle of probabilistic predeterminations. However, in each of the named ideologies, there are contradictions, and those who know them skillfully push followers of ideologies against each other. There is a contradiction between the Quran and the Bible. The Quran says that Jesus Christ was not crucified, but the Bible says that he was crucified. On the basis of these contradictions, if the need arises, these ideologically different elements of the super system can be easily collided with each other. Karl Marx says that there is no God, while Christians and Muslims say that God exists. And due to such a difference in understanding, one can manipulate people. This is what is done by transnational corporations and banks. Just imagine, we are the heads of transnational corporations, and we produce military helicopters, aircraft, or ships. We need to sell them. How to sell? There should be a war. How to organize a war? For this very purpose, all of a sudden, religious antagonisms are aroused. A conflict on religious grounds is aroused, an Indian-Pakistan conflict. Some defend some ideals, others other ideals. In the meantime, we are selling weapons. We don't even need to have a big war. It is possible to organize a small local conflict or tension that reveals the shortcomings of the weapons, after which transnational corporations carry out modifications to the weapons. This means re-equipping of the existing weapons or disposing of the old in order to produce new weapons. Money talks again. In other words, some die at war, some make profits from it. The biggest money circulates in three markets. The first one is the raw material market. Oil, for example, determines almost all pricing. Weapons go in the second place, and drugs go in the third place. And now the drug market is more profitable than the arms market. Now, from the position of the third factological technological priority, or the priority of ideologies, one can look at what is happening in Russia. Pushkin's words on this priority are quite telling. Grace, if you will, you peaceful nations, who never rouse at honor's horn. Should flocks hit freedom's invocations, their part is to be slain or shorn. Their dower the yoke their sires have won, through snug and sheepish generations. So, we are graced by all sorts of muftis, mullahs, priests, archimandrites, general secretaries, and shone like rams with the help of usury. From the point of view of party building, what happened to us? We were given freedom, democracy, and divided into many parties. Look, the agrarian party defends the interests of the peasants. Another party is for the interests of the workers. The movement in support of the army moans in support of the army. Another party is for the entrepreneurs. Christians have cross processions, Muslims pray to the prayer rug, and so on. So we are all divided. And pay attention, all these parties are working for the happiness of the people. But did people really get better thanks to the work of all these parties? Villages are destroyed, workers are unemployed, have no wages, the army is defeated without war, small and medium-sized businesses are dying, and the Orthodox are successfully at odds with Muslims. But all our officials are for the people's happiness. This is something to ponder on. Everything depends on the conception. Divide, pit, and conquer. And thou shalt reign over many nations, but they shall not reign over thee. In the meantime, the Jews are made scapegoats, but they are hostages. We tell Jews that they are just a tool. When the tool is blunt, the global predictor throws it away and picks up a new one. And all the parties I have named are inscribed in this general biblical conception. The leaders of these parties themselves do not understand that our country is being destroyed by their hands. In our country, on the basis of the old conception, it is impossible to solve a single problem. Not a single problem will be solved until we change the conception, because it makes no sense to fight within the boundaries of the biblical conception. However, we are told, fight, defend your rights. But in the end, the result is zero, a donut hole. As we have already touched upon the army, here is an example of the Soviet army. The words of one son dedicated to it: invincible and legendary, in battle who experienced the joy of victories. And where is it, our invincible and legendary army? It was destroyed without war. Was our army weak? No, it wasn't. Were our tanks bad? So I served in the missile forces. Did we have bad missiles? No. Yes, of course, there were drawbacks, there were nuances, but everyone in the world was afraid of our army. Now, going back to the priorities, let's observe something. The army solves tasks on the sixth priority. Going higher up to the fifth priority, alcohol. Did our officers drink? It's not a secret, everyone drank. The whole country drank. And the officers drank so much. Next, the economic priority. Some were given the opportunity to make profits, like in the case when our troops were withdrawn from Germany. Can you imagine how much some people plundered there? However, junior officers lived in poverty with their low wages. For this reason, they left the army. In other words, some were striving to feather their nests, and the others had to exist in poverty. And this is the administrative corps of the army, the basis of the army. Let's look from the standpoint of the factological ideological priority. Now, there is no official unified ideology at all. At the time of the USSR, we at least had an ideology, in spite of the fact that it contained errors. Looking at the things from the standpoints of the rest of the priorities, especially from the first one, the metrological priority, the priority of worldviews, we see that there is no methodology, and it didn't exist before. All this together led to the fact that the army was defeated without war. We Russians were defeated without war. We do not actually have an army. And Putin said this when the Gens entered Dagestan. There was no army, no troops to protect Dagestan. For this very reason, order couldn't be restored in Chechnya either. Moving on, the second priority is the chronological priority, at which governance is carried out based on the use of information of a historical nature. So, for example, our official version says that the Russian writing emerged thanks to Cyril and Methodius, whereas, in fact, we had a writing system in Russia before their emergence, which today is not available to a vast majority, and what's more, this majority is also incapable of mastering it. Those who support the version that Russians had their own writing system before Cyril and Methodius are declared pagans, who in their turn are ready to kill the Orthodox. This is how people are pitted against each other on the basis of historical myths. The power of this historical chronological priority can be illustrated by another distortion. We are told, facts are stubborn things. It is a lie. Facts are very flexible. I have 5 fingers on my hand. Is that a fact? It is a fact. I show this fact like this. It is one picture. Like this, another one. And like that, a third picture. And so on. What is history? This is a collection of facts. From the standpoint of Christianity, it is one story. From the standpoint of Buddhism, another story. From the standpoint of Islam, a third story. And on this basis, historical myths are formed, along with ideologies and views on life. This is how the principle of divide, pit, and conquer is implemented. Thus, we made sure that the chronological priority is a very powerful weapon. It was at our school that they treated history as something unnecessary. They said that you need to know mathematics, physics, and so on, but the humanities are generally not needed. But now you see that history is a very powerful weapon. You know, there are many historical theories of different kinds. Generally speaking, in the conception of social safety, we believe that every researcher, author of new theories, and so on, before presenting his work for public viewing, must express his Nravers and worldview standard. That is, show his philosophical foundation, express his attitude to the governance of social processes, to God, and so on. In the conception of social safety, history is examined through the prism of governance over social processes. After all, there are so many facts in history that you cannot describe them all. But knowing how governance is carried out, one can understand the Wars of the Roses in England, for example. In particular, it was the shaving down of the national English elite. One can also understand the arrival of Christianity in Russia as the conquest of Russia by Byzantium. While Sviatoslav Igorovich, who also preferred a simple way of communication with ordinary people, unlike the hierarchs of the church, was fighting against the Khazar Khaganate, his mother and the elite of the time fell in love with beautiful chants in Christianity, luxurious robes, all sorts of pleasing vestments, and the introduction of Christianity into Russia began. In those days, there were no discos, clubs, and other entertainment establishments. Entertainment was at a rather primitive level. How could one entertain oneself? One could go to the synagogue for brainwashing, as one could listen to beautiful songs there, observe beautiful rituals, and so on. So the elite of that time drove our country into dependence. Moving from the chronological priority up to the methodological, metrological one, I would like to say something about Israel Matter, who wrote the novel The Fifth Corner, where he says the following: I have a lot of facts. I have enough facts. I'm fed up with facts, but I'm poor methodologically. And this is the circle around which we, meaning the Jews, occupy a perimeter defense and shoot back to the last bullet, which suggests the last bullet for themselves. It has been said, as you can see, quite definitely. What is it about? So let's go back to the two pyramids again. Here at the top is the methodology, and the elite are given knowledge of facts that they should know. The Minister of Railways has knowledge concerning his field. He doesn't have to know history. The Minister of Defense is familiar with his field. He doesn't have to know the economy. That is, everyone honestly does their job. They do not possess the method of distinguishing what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong, what is useful, what is harmful. It is possible to give people such knowledge so that they can understand everything themselves, what is right and what is wrong, what is true and what is false. That is, to distinguish the phenomena that occur in people's lives. Now, imagining that we are slave masters, let's pose the question like this. Do we need slaves to understand better than us? I suppose the answer is obvious. For this very reason, the knowledge is not given to the lower stratons of the crowd elite model pyramid. So, being at the top, the ancient Egyptian Jretzes had correct views about creation, how the processes in creation flow, and they did not give the rest of society this knowledge. But they gave them false concepts, views. That is why the most important, most powerful and stable weapon is the methodological, metrological weapon. Its purpose is to prevent slaves from getting out of obedience, and it doesn't let slaves understand anything. In ancient times, it was enough just to give people the erroneous idea, view on the surrounding world, and this made it possible to reign over billions of people over several thousands of years. In this sense, it is appropriate to remember that in Egypt, in Luxor, there are monuments of antiquity, one of which is the stone on which, after the Battle of Kadesh in 1312 BC, when the Hittites defeated the Egyptians, Ramses II carved. Everyone thinks that in Kadesh the Hittites defeated me, but the next 3,000 years will say that I defeated the Hittites. What did Ramses II mean? Let's turn to the priorities. The troops of Ramses II were defeated on the sixth priority. But for 3,500 years, The process of concentration of productive forces of the planet Earth with the help of the methodology has been flowing. And now the world is in the hands of this global mafia, the global predictor, the heirs of those ancient Egyptian Ratzis. But having chosen the erroneous vector of goals, they've led humanity to a global system crisis. This is the role of methodology, the methodological metrological priority. Speaking in relation to modern events in Russia, we can see that many of the patriots are yelling that it is necessary to urgently solve economic problems. We have a question. What will this lead to? Will we be able to transform the country's economy without mastering the methodological priority? From the standpoint of this priority, you can also see the role of parties, the role of prominent people. Let's look at what they tell us through the prism of the priorities. Many patriots are confined to the fact that everyone should take up arms and kill everyone in the Kremlin. Other patriots say that we need to solve economic problems, that all this empty verbal chatter on our economy should be stopped. However, the national economy of the country is only the fourth priority, which is determined by ideologies, historical traditions, preferences of the people, and so on. No one talks about this at all. There are also patriots in our country who support good things like a healthy lifestyle. They do not drink or smoke, and so on. Well, but if you and I are slave masters, we will definitely be for a healthy way of life among our slaves, because we need healthy slaves. Again, this is only the fifth priority. In addition, many of those who do not drink or have given up drinking in our country have begun to literally sober others up and make money on this. So it turns out that in order for such people to live well, there have to be more alcoholics. Because if there are no alcoholics, there is nobody to be treated. If so, how can such people make money? Moreover, such people, as well as some of our officials, state that they stay away from politics. Speaking of the Communist Party of Russia, this fact refers to the third priority. But what is their ideology? Marxism. In other words, it is materialistic, which means erroneous ideas, views on life. It is a whole system of erroneous views, as the ideology of the Communist Party contains no God, and all this leads the party to a dead end. Above the ideological priority, we actually have no one in the country, no one acting on the higher priorities. This is how one should look at the role of parties, from the standpoints of the priorities. Who offers what, and what to expect from these people. Therefore, when talking about the conception of social safety, it is necessary to highlight the dangers. Well, when we studied the cycle of our lectures, I explained the choice of the word social, but not national safety. Because in relation to Russia, we have a multinational country, many peoples. If we say national safety, then what nationality in Russia is it about? But we already know that a word is a code measure. We therefore must always give a clear logical definition. Moreover, if we talk not only about Russia, but also about humanity as a whole, then we know that many peoples, nationalities, religious confessions, races live on planet Earth. For this reason, we need to talk about the conception of social safety. That is, how we, all countries and nations, will live together. In addition, it should be noted that safety implies not only physical safety, security, but also safety on all six priorities of generalized means of governance. In our country, They also talk about information security, but cybersecurity is understood as information security, nothing more. But we, in the conception of social safety, talk about safety, security. On the sixth priority, the safety of life. On the fifth priority, health safety. On the fourth priority, economic and financial safety of the entire national economy. On the third priority, ideological safety, the correspondence of ideas to reality, in order to prevent catastrophes. On the second priority, historical safety, in the sense of taking history from the level of myth to the level of reality that actually happened. On the first priority, the methodological and ideological safety, in the sense of mastering the worldview and philosophy of the Trinity of MIM, matter, information, measure.